What are the greenhouse effect and global warming?
A greenhouse is a glass structure built for plants. The glass walls and ceiling allow the light from the sun to enter but prevent the sun's heat from leaving, providing the kind of warm climate greenhouse plants need. Certain gases in the atmosphere act in much the same way as the glass panels of the greenhouse, letting sunlight shine through to the ground and trapping the heat produced by that light. The greenhouse effect happens naturally, without human interference. But by introducing large amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, human beings have turned a natural occurrence into a potential problem. With the industrialization of the 1800s and 1900s, the amount of greenhouse gases increased tremendously. Some greenhouse gases, like carbon dioxide, are produced by burning such fuels as coal, natural gas, and oil. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased by about 25% in the last 200 years. Plants absorb some carbon dioxide, but much of it rises to the atmosphere, contributing to the greenhouse effect. Other gases that contribute to the greenhouse effect are ozone and methane. If too much heat is trapped in the atmosphere, it may eventually make Earth's climate warmer. This effect, known as global warming, may seem harmless enough. And if you live in a place with harsh winters, it might even seem like a good thing. But the delicate balance of life on Earth can be severely disrupted by a change in the planet's climate. If the temperature of Earth's surface increased enough, it could melt the polar ice caps. The massive, thick ice formations at the North and South Poles, raising the level of the oceans and possibly flooding coastal areas. Climate changes can also affect weather patterns, changing rainfall and snowfall amounts and making storms more severe, and the lives of plants and animals.
Why do clothes for men and women have their buttons on different sides?
Most people, about 90%, are right-handed, and it is easiest for them to button their clothes from left to right, which is the way that men's buttons are arranged.
Do all plants have leaves?
The simplest types of plants, like algae, don't have leaves. But they do have chlorophyll in their cells and make their own food through photosynthesis. Using sunlight, water, and minerals. Mosses have leaf-like structures that carry out photosynthesis. But they are not true leaves because they don't have the special tissues xylem and phloem that distribute food, water, and minerals throughout most plants. The lack of a transportation system is the reason that mosses are so tiny and low to the ground. More complex types of plants have leaves. Leaf shape is often determined by conditions in the environment. Usually, where sunlight and water are plentiful, leaves are flat and broad, providing a large surface area where photosynthesis can take place. Where weather is cold and dry, however, water loss can be a problem. The long, needle-shaped leaves of conifer trees, including pines, for example, help retain water, allowing the plants to grow in very dry, cold places, far north or high in the mountains. The extreme environment of the desert, intensely hot and dry, has brought about other special leaf adaptations. Many desert plants have fleshy leaves and stems, in which they are able to store large amounts of water. Over millions of years, the leaves of desert cactus plants became so small to restrict water loss through transpiration that on many only sharp spines remain. The thick-skinned stems or branches of cactus plants now do the job that leaves do for other plants, making food through photosynthesis.
Why do I shiver when I'm cold?
When your brain receives the signal that you are cold, it sets off a series of reactions. One of these reactions causes your muscles to repeatedly and quickly contract, or tighten, and relax. Muscle movement uses energy and produces heat, that is why people become warm when they exercise. In other words, when you feel cold, your body starts working on its own to make some extra heat to warm you up.
What is the largest animal in the world?
The largest animal in the world is the blue whale. It can reach a length of 110 feet, 33.5 meters, and weigh more than 150 tons, 300,000 pounds. Its head makes up nearly 1/4 of its body, and its heart is the size of a small car. It is thought to be the largest animal that has ever lived, bigger than the largest dinosaur. Even a baby blue whale is bigger than an elephant, which is the largest land animal. There are two types of whales: toothed whales, which use their teeth to catch fish and squid, that they usually swallow whole, and baleen whales, which are toothless, but have sheets of a horny substance called baleen attached to their upper jaws. The baleen works like a giant strainer, letting water, including tiny plant and animal life called plankton, move back and forth through it. Loads of plankton are trapped behind the baleen and then swallowed. The blue whale is an example of a baleen whale, which means that the largest creature in the world feeds on some of the smallest plants and animals that exist.
How are seeds made?
Conifers, plants that bear cones, and flowering plants all make seeds. Plants that produce flowers, called angiosperms, cover 90% of Earth's land surface. Most of the plants we know, like broadleaf trees, vines, grass, and more, are flowering plants. although sometimes their flowers are so small and colorless that we barely notice them. While flowering plants now dominate the world, that was not always the case. They are relatively new to Earth, appearing just 135 million years ago. In ages before then, simpler plants dominated. The Great Age of Conifers, which bear seeds in cones, began 300 million years ago. Coniferous trees, which are part of the plant group Gymnosperms. Like pines, spruces, firs, and cypresses, bear male and female cones. Male cones contain sacs that release millions of tiny grains of pollen, male reproductive cells, into the air. They are carried by the wind to female cones that have reproductive cells located in ovules, which are sticky and attract pollen grains. When male and female cells meet, fertilization occurs, and seeds form in the scales of a female cone, which increases in size as the seeds grow. Once the seeds are mature, which takes a couple of years, the cone opens to release them. Equipped with a wing to help it to travel in the wind. Each seed has a tough outer coating and some food inside to use if it finds a good spot to start growing. Seed making in flowering plants is a little more complicated. Most flowers contain both male and female sex cells. The typical flower has four main parts: an outer cup of leaf-like sepals, a ring of petals within the sepals, and inside, male reproductive organs surrounding female parts. Male cells develop in structures called stamens and travel enclosed in the hard shell of pollen grains. Female cells, or ovules, develop deep in a flower's ovary, enclosed in a structure called a pistil. The top of the pistil, known as the stigma, is long and sticky and a good target for pollen. After it reaches the stigma, a small tube grows out of the pollen grain. The male cells travel down the pollen tube, eventually reaching female ovules. Then fertilization occurs and seeds start to grow. Since flowers possess both male and female parts, some flowers can fertilize themselves, or fertilize another flower on the same plant, which is called self-pollination. Or the ovules of one flower may be fertilized by the pollen of a different flowering plant of the same species, a method called cross-pollination. The wind, water, insects, and other animals help to carry pollen from one flower to another. Cross-pollination usually produces a better plant. The offspring of cross-pollination possesses the genetic traits of two parents, which may give it new characteristics that will help it survive in an always changing environment. Cross-pollination is so desirable, in fact, that many flowering plants have developed different ways to keep self-pollination from happening. In the flowers of a spiderwort plant, for example, the stamens are ready to release pollen grains before the pistils are ready to accept them. So the pollen has to travel to other spiderwort plants in search of a ripe pistil.
What starts a cough?
A cough starts with an irritation in the throat, windpipe, or lungs. Your body's automatic reaction to any such irritation is a very strong contraction of the muscles that control breathing, which causes a burst of air from the lungs to the mouth that is meant to clear your airways. The irritant may be dust, fumes from chemicals, or a particle of food. Colds and other respiratory infections often cause coughing, because they inflame your airways and fill them with extra mucus. Coughs are important and, in most cases, should not be suppressed with medicines. You need to cough to keep your airways free of things that could damage your lungs or interfere with your ability to breathe. If the cough is severe enough to interfere with sleep or to cause vomiting, your doctor may recommend medicine that will help suppress the cough.
Why do giraffes have such long necks?
Giraffes, the tallest of all animals, have such long necks because they eat leaves from the tops of some very high trees, beyond the reach of other animals. Living in the grasslands of Africa, they feed chiefly on acacia and mimosa trees, using their long tongues and strong lips to pull off the highest leaves. A baby giraffe is about 6 feet, 1.8 meters, tall at birth, and a full-grown male giraffe can reach a height of 18 feet. 5.4 meters, from his hooves to the top of his head, about as high as a 2-story house. A giraffe may have a neck that measures up to 7 feet, 2 meters, long. Still, giraffes have the same number of bones or vertebrae in their necks as we do. The giraffe's bones are just much longer. Giraffes also have very long legs, which contribute to their great height. While their long legs allow them to outrun most of their enemies, they also cause a problem. Giraffes must spread their legs wide apart in order to reach anything on the ground, like water or grass. The position is an awkward one and leaves them vulnerable to attacks from predators. But they can protect themselves with their large hooves. Kicking a beast even as powerful as a lion to death.
Why is cloning so controversial?
The possibility of cloning human beings arouses curiosity and excitement in some people and deep suspicion and fear in others. Scientists and doctors have long intervened in the creation of new life, such as using various fertility treatments to help people have babies who otherwise couldn't. But these techniques require doctors to assist in the process that happens in nature, the merging of a sperm cell from a man's body with an egg from a woman's body. Cloning bypasses that process altogether, using one person's cells to create a new human being that will be identical to that person. That level of scientific involvement in the creation of human life makes many people uncomfortable. Supporters of cloning technology argue that there are numerous benefits to human cloning. Many scientists believe that cloning can lead to Important breakthroughs for people with incurable diseases. This type of activity, called therapeutic cloning, has as its goal the creation of certain kinds of cells rather than the duplication of a complete person. In such experiments, a human embryo, the group of cells that, if implanted into a uterus, would grow into a baby, would be produced through cloning so that the embryo's stem cells, special cells that can develop into many different kinds of cells and tissue, can be extracted, destroying the embryo in the process. Stem cells can then be used to grow new tissue to replace a sick person's damaged organs or to cure diseases that otherwise would be fatal. Some scientists wish to pursue cloning technology to create babies for people who are unable to have children, and who wish to produce a child that shares their genetic makeup rather than adopting a baby. Many people have deeply felt concerns about cloning, particularly human cloning. They fear that this relatively new science is still too risky and unpredictable. Experiments with cloning a human might result in serious defects or health problems for the cloned subjects. Even Ian Wilmut, the scientist who led the team that produced the cloned sheep dolly, has strongly objected to experimenting with human cloning before further research is done. Many people object to cloning on religious grounds, arguing that life is sacred, and only God, not scientists and doctors, can create new life. Others worry that the ability to clone a person might be abused by some who would spend a great deal of money to create a genetically perfect child, selecting certain traits and discarding others. Many people are disturbed by the thought that some people might use cloning technology to replace a loved one who had died. Canadian.
What is an ant?
An aunt is the sister of your mother or father. She can also be the woman who marries your mother or father's brother. If your mother and father have many brothers and sisters, you can have a lot of aunts. Sometimes a woman who is not related to you but who helps, advises, and encourages you as an aunt would, is affectionately referred to as your aunt.
Are any other planets in our solar system like Earth?
Although scientists believe that all the planets in our solar system were formed at the same time, from the same giant cloud of gas and dust, each is very different from the others. The 4 planets nearest the Sun: Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars are known as terrestrial planets, because they are made of rock and metal. The next 4 planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, are called the gaseous planets. As they are made mostly of such gases as helium and hydrogen, their inner layers are liquids, and they may have rocky cores. Not much is known about Pluto, the farthest planet from the Sun, about 3.66 billion miles away. A small, solid planet, Pluto is thought by some to be made mainly of ice. Some scientists have suggested that Pluto may not be a planet at all. It may simply be a large piece in a band of rocky objects, called the Kuiper belt, that orbits the Sun. The planets of our solar system vary greatly in size, rotation, and other characteristics. The smallest planet, Pluto, has a diameter, the measurement through its widest part, of 1,430 miles, 2,288 kilometers, which makes it smaller than our own moon. Jupiter, on the other hand, has a diameter of 88,700 miles. 141,920 kilometers, which is about 11 times the size of Earth's diameter. If Jupiter were a hollow ball, it would take more than 1,000 Earths to fill it. Jupiter also has the fastest rotation, or spin, on its axis, completing a day and night in just 9 hours, 55 minutes. It takes Jupiter a much longer time than Earth to rotate around the Sun. However, a Jupiter year is 4,333 days. Mercury has one of the slowest axis rotations. It takes 59 Earth days for Mercury to make a complete turn on its axis. But Mercury rotates around the Sun much faster than Earth does. It takes only 88 days, a very short year compared to Earth's 365 days. Because Mercury rotates slowly on its own axis and quickly around the Sun, its days defined as the time from one sunrise to the next are as long as 176 Earth days. Saturn is perhaps the most interesting looking planet. Surrounded by 7 wide, bright rings made mostly of ice. Jupiter and Uranus also have rings, though they are harder to see than Saturn's. Although not closest to the Sun, Venus is the hottest planet because its thick atmosphere of mostly carbon dioxide traps in the heat of the sunlight that reaches the surface of the planet. The average temperature on the surface of Venus is 900 degrees Fahrenheit, 481 degrees Celsius. Mars is the planet most like Earth, with a thin atmosphere and a surface that has mountains and valleys, extinct volcanoes, and what looks like dried-up riverbeds. Scientists wonder if some form of life once existed there. They have been trying for years to figure out a way for humans to explore that planet. Only Earth has liquid water on its surface, which is necessary for life as we know it. Without water, plants could not grow, and without plants, oxygen, the gas essential for animal life, would not be released into the atmosphere.
Why do I have to wear braces?
Straight teeth that are spaced well in the mouth are easier to clean. They bite and chew better, and they last longer. They look nice, too. Few people have perfect teeth. But doctors called orthodontists can change the position of teeth to work and look better. These changes are usually done during childhood and early adolescence, when teeth and jaws are softer and still growing. Special appliances like braces, wires, bands, and more are used to slowly, over many months, push or pull teeth into their correct positions.
What does it mean when an animal is extinct?
Extinction happens when a species of plant or animal dies out completely. Extinction is a permanent state. Once a species is extinct, it cannot be revived. Scientists believe that extinction usually occurs when a species cannot adapt to major changes to its environment. Some species adapt dramatically to such changes, and in doing so they become an entirely new species. Meaning the species they evolved from becomes extinct. The actions of human beings have caused numerous extinctions. At one time many people believed that Earth's resources, fresh water, trees, fuel sources, animals used for food were unlimited. People have hunted or fished for an animal in such great numbers that the deaths outnumbered births, and the species could not survive. Tearing down forests or filling in swamps to build homes, golf courses, or shopping malls has had a great impact on animal life. Many animals can no longer survive if their habitat is destroyed. Pollution of the air, soil, and water has also been a factor in the destruction of many species. It's important to remember that while human beings have caused the extinction of many species, we also have the ability to protect and save endangered plants and animals. Wildlife preservation laws and organizations like the Sierra Club first arose in the late 1800s. After people began to realize the devastating impact their actions could have on animal species. Widespread hunting of the American bison, for example, reduced the animal's population from 60 million in 1860 to only about 550 just 30 years later. Such a huge and fast reduction in the bison's numbers alarmed many people. In 1966 the U.S. Congress passed the important Endangered Species Protection Act, which meant that animals whose populations were shrinking could be protected from hunters and land developers. That law, and many others passed since then, has generated controversy in situations where the building of a bridge or dam or airport could threaten an endangered species but would help the people living nearby. As the world's population continues to grow, with more and more people living in what used to be animal habitats, such conflicts are likely to increase. Of all the animal and plant species that have ever lived, far more than half are now extinct. On the other hand, new species develop and are discovered all the time. So a balance between death and new life is maintained.
Why do my ears pop when I'm traveling in an airplane?
Your eardrum is a thin, stretched membrane that separates your outer and middle ear. When sound waves hit it, it vibrates, just like the head of a drum. Your eardrum transfers sound vibrations to tiny bones in your middle ear. whose own vibrations increase the strength of the sound. The eustachian tube, which connects your middle ear with your throat, is responsible for keeping the air pressure in the back of your eardrum in the middle ear the same as it is in front of it. If air pressure is less behind your eardrums than in front, they are stretched backward and cannot do their job as well. Your ears feel blocked or stuffy and sometimes even hurt. This pressure change happens when you move quickly between high and low places, like in an airplane. Sometimes swallowing hard or yawning can stretch open the eustachian tube, forcing more air into your middle ear. Your ears will pop, then, which is a sign that air pressure is equalized in your ear and that your eardrums have snapped back into place. After your ears pop, you should be able to hear normally.
What is an iceberg?
An iceberg, a large mass of ice that floats in the sea. Usually comes from a glacier, a large mass of ice located on land, or from an ice sheet that covers a large expanse of water. Icebergs are much larger than they appear. Only about 1/10 of an iceberg shows above the water line. A fact that can cause problems for ships. A ship may steer around the visible part of an iceberg only to collide with the wide base hidden beneath the water's surface. The Titanic, a luxury ocean liner that set sail across the North Atlantic in 1912, is perhaps the most famous ship to crash into an iceberg and sink, resulting in the deaths of more than 1,500 of its passengers. Modern sonar, sound wave, and radar, radio wave equipment used during regular sea and air patrols have greatly reduced the danger of icebergs for ships today. The largest icebergs can be found in the Antarctic Ocean, near the South Pole. Some large icebergs have been known to reach heights of 328 feet, 100 meters above the water's surface, and one of the largest icebergs ever found was thought to be 170 miles. 274 kilometers, long and 25 miles, 40 kilometers, wide. The area of that iceberg nearly equals that of the state of Connecticut.
How do seeds become plants?
Once seeds are fully developed, they need a good place to grow. If they just fell to the ground beneath their parent plant, they would struggle, competing against each other for sunlight, water, and minerals. Most seeds need to travel, then by wind, water, or with the help of insects and other animals to better places to germinate, or start to grow into new plants. Some seeds, like those from conifer and maple trees, have wings attached. Others, like those of dandelions, have parachutes made of tiny hairs. Both features allow the seeds to be carried great distances by the wind. And they sometimes land in spots that are good for germination. Water carries other seeds to good growing places, the hard, watertight shell of a coconut, for instance, allows it to travel many miles at sea before finding a beach where conditions are suitable for growth. Animals are great seed carriers. They take them from one place to another in their mouths, as does a squirrel preparing for winter, or sometimes seeds stick on their fur or feathers. But most often seeds travel in animals' digestive systems. Some plants grow colorful and tasty fruits, which are really just fleshy seed coverings meant to attract hungry animals. When creatures like birds, bats, raccoons, or bears eat berries and other fruits, they usually swallow the seeds whole. Safe inside a hard coating, the seeds pass through unaffected by digestive juices, appearing many hours later in animal waste. The seeds sometimes emerge in places far from their parent plants, in locations better for germination. Seeds, then, sometimes have to wait a long time before they find good places to grow. Places where the sun, moisture, and temperature are right. Most seeds are designed for the wait, protected by a hard outer pod, except those of conifers. Some seeds wait years to germinate, and some just never do. But inside each seed pod is a baby plant, or embryo, and endosperm, a supply of starchy food that will be used for early growth if germination takes place. Then a tiny root will reach down into the soil, and a tiny green shoot will reach up, toward the light.
Where do people go after they die?
Because no one has come back to our world after dying. It is not possible to know for sure what happens to people after death. Nearly all the religions of the world believe that some kind of existence continues after life on earth stops, that a person's soul or spirit continues to exist in a way we can't really imagine even after his or her body is dead. In fact, a lot of religions teach the belief that our life on earth is a stage or time of preparation, or a test by which we're judged, that leads to a final, perfect state of existence that we will share with God in a spiritual realm after we die. Many people who don't subscribe to religious beliefs about an afterlife think that people simply end when they die. That once the physical body has died, all awareness and existence ceases.
What's so funny about that?
The funny bone got its name from the bone located above it. The humerus, sounds like humerus, bone in the upper arm.
What is the purpose of dreaming?
While scientists aren't sure, they know that people who are prevented from dreaming, people whose sleep is interrupted, become crabby, slow thinking, and clumsy. So it is clear that dreams are needed to keep the brain healthy for some of its complex functions, like memory and concentration. Many psychologists and psychiatrists, professionals who study mental and emotional behavior, believe that dreams provide us with ways of working through fears and anxieties. These professionals often analyze their patients' dreams to figure out what might be troubling them. Our dreams often feature people we know and events that recently happened in our lives. Though dreams are frequently so strange and unreal that it's hard to recognize the familiar in them.
Where does meat come from?
Meat is the flesh of any animal that is used for food. It is usually the muscle and connective tissue of an animal. Though organs like the liver and heart are also eaten. Cattle, sheep, and pigs provide most of the meat that people eat. People in different parts of the world usually eat more of one kind of meat than another. Usually because certain animals are easier to raise in particular environments. In the Middle East, for instance, sheep thrive on land that is too dry for cattle. Therefore, lamb and mutton, flesh from mature sheep, are the main meats eaten there. Cattle, the source of beef, are raised in big herds and need a lot of grazing room. So large countries that have a lot of pasture land like Argentina, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States raise the most cattle and eat the most beef. Wild cattle were tamed or domesticated about 9,000 years ago. They were valued as much for the work that they did carrying and pulling heavy loads as for the milk and meat that they provided. Over time, farmers developed breeds that were meant only to provide meat. Looking quite different from slim, long-legged dairy cows. Beef cattle have wide fleshy bodies and short legs. Today, livestock animals that are ready for market are usually shipped from the farms or ranches on which they're raised to big meat processing centers near large cities, where the food they provide is most needed. After they are slaughtered, their meat is packaged and sent to markets near and far. With the help of refrigerated trucks, trains, and ships. Other animal body parts like hides, hoofs, and bones are also put to good use. Making leather goods, fertilizers, and other products.
Do plants feel when they are cut?
Plants don't have nervous systems like animals do. The nervous system of an animal controls its actions and reactions to its environment. In complex animals, special senses send information, electrochemical impulses, along nerve pathways to their brains about things occurring inside and outside their bodies. Without such a message system, plants can't feel or react like animals do. So plants don't feel when they are cut. But plants do respond to things in their environment, like gravity, light, and even touch. Chemical messengers called hormones tell special cells and tissues how to respond to different conditions inside and outside a plant. Hormones tell seedlings to grow up from the ground, away from the pull of gravity. They tell houseplants to turn their leaves toward windows, where light comes in. They tell certain insect-eating plants to snap their leaves shut when prey lands there. They tell other plants to develop fruit following pollination. Although the many hormones that affect the lives of plants are not fully understood by scientists, it is clear that plants function remarkably well, though in very different ways from animals.
How do telephones work?
All sound is made by the back and forth movement, or vibration, of objects. When an object vibrates, it makes the molecules around it vibrate too, causing a ripple of motion known as a sound wave, which can travel through air, water, and solid materials. A telephone has vibrating parts, a disc in the mouthpiece and one in the earpiece that turn voice sounds into electrical signals that can travel along telephone wires and then turn back into sound again. Phones are usually connected to wires because they run on electricity. When you pick up a phone, a low electrical current allows you to dial the series of numbers that will connect you to the phone of a friend, for example. Each number on the phone has its own special electrical signal. And when the right numbers are combined, they can exactly identify your friend's phone line. A local telephone office receives this information when you dial and sends your call in the right direction. Call signals to places close by travel along wires or cables, buried underground or strung high in the air between supports. But when the person you call is very far away, the electrical signals sent from your phone are changed into invisible waves of energy called microwaves, which can travel long distances through the air. These waves are sent through space to communication satellites that orbit the world, which bounce them back to Earth, extending the wave's travel distance. An antenna at a receiving station near the home of your friend picks up the waves and changes them to electrical signals once more. They travel by cable to the telephone office that services your friend's neighborhood, where his or her number is identified. A signal is then sent to your friend's phone to make it ring. The entire process from dialing to ringing takes just a few seconds. When your friend answers the phone, a microphone in its mouthpiece contains a plastic disc that vibrates, turning his or her message into electrical signals that travel along the same path as before. A speaker in the earpiece of your phone receives the electrical signals, which vibrate another plastic disc that changes them back into sound. Two circuits from microphone to speaker are created, and you can talk back and forth with your friend. The next time you use the phone, think of the remarkable process that makes it possible.
Where does the moon go during the day?
Because Earth makes a complete spin on its axis each day. The spot that we occupy on Earth is generally turned away from the moon and its reflected sunlight during the daytime. When we have daytime, the other side of the world is experiencing night, and the moon is visible to them. But at certain times of the month, when weather conditions are just right, the moon can be seen when the sun is still shining if you look hard enough in the bright sky.
Will the sun ever burn out?
It is believed that the sun, like all stars, will burn out eventually. As a star uses up the hydrogen that fuels the nuclear reactions that power it, it is thought to die, collapsing in upon itself. But it's unlikely this will happen in the near future. Our sun is expected to shine for at least another 5 billion years.
Why do people cry when someone dies?
Crying is a way of expressing sadness. It helps people who have lost someone close to them to express their grief and sorrow. Talking about the dead person also helps. People cry because they will never again see the person who has died, and they know they will miss that person. If the death is unexpected, the tears may also be caused by feelings of shock and anger. During the period immediately following a person's death, when the loss of that loved one is felt most sharply, grieving people are not comforted by the fact that dying is a natural and necessary process that happens to all living things. As time passes, however, they begin to accept the loss of their loved one, and the pain of that loss becomes easier to bear. Thinking of the person after some time has passed brings less sadness and maybe even some pleasure, as good times with the loved one are remembered.
How can plants like seaweed grow underwater?
As long as they get enough sunlight to carry out photosynthesis. Plants can live at various depths in oceans or other bodies of water. The stems of most underwater plants usually hold them upright so they can grow toward the light that filters down through their watery homes. When the countless animals that live in seas and lakes breathe, they provide water plants with the carbon dioxide they need for photosynthesis. As underwater plants release oxygen during photosynthesis, you can sometimes see it bubble to the surface. In the same way that bubbles appear when people breathe out underwater. Seaweeds are odd underwater plants because they don't have true roots, stems, or leaves. They are really just larger forms of single-celled algae, the simplest type of plant that exists. Many seaweeds have fronds that look like leaves and stalks that look like stems. Some even have holdfasts that do the work of roots, attaching them to rocks or seabeds. but these special parts don't do different jobs, like they do in most plants. All parts of a seaweed plant absorb water, carbon dioxide, minerals, and sunlight for photosynthesis. Algae are very important plants. Water covers much of the world's surface, which means algae cover much of the world's surface too. All plants release oxygen as part of photosynthesis, and the large quantities of this simple plant make algae a major source of the oxygen we breathe. One of the most common types of seaweed, known as giant kelp, forms underwater forests in the oceans, providing shelter, food, and oxygen for countless sea animals. Some of these plants have fronds up to 200 feet, 61 meters, long and grow up to 75 feet, 23 meters, below the sea surface. A type of red seaweed can grow even deeper up to 200 feet, or 61 meters, below the surface. Some seaweeds are eaten by people mostly in the East, and they are used to make things like fertilizers, cosmetics, and medicines.
What makes popcorn pop?
Believe it or not, most hard popcorn kernels have tiny bits of water inside. When these kernels are heated, the water gradually expands and turns into steam. At a certain point, the increasing steam can no longer be contained inside each kernel and explodes through the hard coating, causing a pop. The steam also cooks the starchy material inside kernels, turning it into the fluffy stuff we know as popcorn.
Why do people sometimes smell bad after they sweat?
You may be surprised to learn that it's not the sweat itself that smells bad. Sweat is mostly water and salt with small concentrations of various waste products. The odor comes from the bacteria living on your skin. When those bacteria begin working to break down your sweat, they produce an unpleasant odor. Fortunately, the smelly results can be washed away with soap and water in the shower or bath. There are actually two different kinds of sweat glands, eccrine glands and apocrine glands. Eccrine glands are found all over your body, while apocrine glands are concentrated mostly in your armpits and groin area. Apocrine glands get especially active when you hit puberty, thanks to the extra hormones released in your body during that time. And, as an added bonus, apocrine glands produce a different kind of sweat, with proteins and fatty acids, that has a particularly foul smell referred to as body odor when it combines with the bacteria on your skin. Kids who haven't reached puberty yet can sweat a lot without getting too stinky. Much of their sweat is coming from the eccrine glands, rather than the more potent apocrine glands, which don't really develop until puberty. The high concentration of apocrine glands in the armpits explains why people put deodorant or antiperspirant there and not elsewhere. By the way, deodorant doesn't stop you from sweating, but it neutralizes the bacteria that make sweat smell. Antiperspirant actually blocks pores in your skin, preventing you from sweating. While many people prefer antiperspirants, wishing to control the wetness as well as the odor of sweat, some experts believe it's better to let the sweat, which carries some waste products out of your body, leave naturally instead of being blocked.
What causes hiccups?
Hiccups are probably caused by eating or drinking too quickly or too much, which leads to irritation of the diaphragm, the large sheet of muscles attached to your lower ribs that separates your chest from your abdomen. The stomach rests just below the diaphragm, which is the main muscle used during breathing. When you have hiccups, the diaphragm contracts more strongly than usual, jerking and forcing you to take sudden noisy breaths. The sudden rush of air forces the flap at the top of your windpipe, called the epiglottis, to shut quickly, resulting in the heek sound. People have all sorts of crazy remedies for curing hiccups, like startling a person or eating certain foods, like peanut butter, but they usually go away by themselves after a few minutes. Some rare cases, however, do last for weeks, months, or even years.
Will I be a parent someday?
Deciding whether or not to have children is something every adult has to decide for him or herself. Statistics of married people in the United States indicate that you have a good chance of becoming a mother or father someday. More than half of all married couples in America have children. Of course, it isn't necessary to marry to become a parent, but many people do. The average American family has 2 children, though some families have 1 child and others have more. If a man and a woman cannot have a baby for health reasons, they may be able to adopt a child whose own biological mother and father cannot take care of him or her, and raise the child as their own. It really makes no difference where a child comes from when it comes to being a mother and a father. Lots of people can produce babies physically, but it is the caring for and the worrying about and the endless love for their children that truly make people mothers and fathers.
Do zoo animals hibernate?
Animals that hibernate in the wild do so because temperatures drop and food supplies become scarce. In the zoo, however, animals live in a controlled environment. They are given a constant supply of food and warm pens or buildings to retreat to when it gets chilly outside. Some animals, including bears, may get sluggish during the coldest months at the zoo, but they will not spend months at a time sleeping as they might do in the wild.
How are newspapers made?
People usually read newspapers to get information about current events. Things that are happening at the present time or have just occurred. So when the people that work for a newspaper learn about something that would make a good news story, they move quickly. Reporters are immediately sent out to gather as much information about the situation as possible, and photographers take pictures that add visual information. When they return to the newspaper office, the reporters type their story into a computer. And camera film is developed into photos in a darkroom. The photographs are put into the computer with a device called a scanner. Increasing numbers of photographers use digital cameras, which means their photos do not have to be first developed on paper. They are automatically in digital, or computer-ready format and can be transmitted over phone lines or via satellites, just like email or other electronic files. Once the photos are in digital format, the printed story and the pictures that illustrate it are arranged together. The story may take up part of a newspaper page or may extend for a few pages. Designers arrange all the stories and photos that make up a newspaper into visually appealing, easy-to-read pages on the computer screen. They are then printed out on pieces of clear film. Next, the film print of each newspaper page is laid on a light-sensitive metal plate. When it is exposed to a flash of bright light, shadows of the film's letters and pictures are left on the plate. The shadows are permanently etched or marked into the plate when it is soaked in acid, which eats some of the metal away. What is left is a perfect copy of the film print of the newspaper page, with its words and pictures appearing as grooves in the metal. The newspaper page is now ready to be printed on paper. The metal plate is first wrapped around a roller on a motor-driven printing press and coated with ink. After being wiped clean, ink still stays in the grooves. When paper, in big rolls, is passed under the roller, it is pressed into the grooves, and perfectly printed pages appear. This process is repeated for each newspaper page. As you can imagine, printing plants are enormous, with some presses standing 3 stories tall. These expensive machines, costing tens of millions of dollars, can print and sort up to 70,000 copies of a newspaper per hour. Once the press is done printing and sorting, the newspapers are bundled for delivery the next day to homes and newsstands. Long before computers and motor-driven presses, printing was done by hand with wooden blocks of letters and figures dipped in ink and pressed onto paper. It is believed that this method of printing was invented in China around the year 700. A hand-operated printing press with movable type or letters was first used in Europe in the mid-15th century. Johannes Gutenberg printed the first book, a Bible, in what is now Germany, in 1455. Until that time all books and other manuscripts had to be written out by hand.
It's like that aspirin went directly to the spot that hurt and somehow took away the pain. But how would it know where to go?
Actually, no pain reliever knows where to go. After you swallow the medicine, it goes through your digestive system and gets absorbed into your bloodstream, traveling throughout your body. So if you have a headache and at the same time happen to have a twisted ankle, the pain reliever you take will help both feel better. When your body experiences pain from a headache or a twisted ankle, say your cells produce a chemical called prostaglandin. When your nerve endings pick up on the presence of this chemical, they send messages to your brain, telling it that the pain is located in your head, or ankle, and whether it hurts a lot or a little. As the medicine in pain relievers makes its way through your body, it prevents the injured cells from making prostaglandin. Therefore the pain messages don't get to your brain. Or at least they don't get there as fast, and you no longer feel uncomfortable.
What makes holes in Swiss cheese?
Enzymes, complex proteins, special bacteria, and molds are added to milk to make cheese. These different additives give cheeses their distinctive looks and tastes. The bacteria that are used to make Swiss cheese remain active for an especially long time. These bacteria turn milk sugars into gas long after the cheese has developed its firm outer covering or rind. Because the gas can't escape at that point, it gathers in pockets as the cheese continues to ripen inside, creating bubbles, which look like holes when the cheese is sliced.
When I take medicine for a headache, how does it know where to go?
When you have a headache or a toothache or any other kind of ache, you take a pain reliever like aspirin, and a few minutes later, the pain is gone.
What happens to garbage that is recycled?
Many communities have trash recycling programs to try to reduce the amount of garbage that must go to landfills. Certain types of trash things made of materials like metal, glass, plastic, paper, and cardboard can usually be processed and reused. Once cleaned and sorted, metal cans, for instance, can be melted down and poured into molds that make new cans or parts for things like cars and kitchen appliances. Glass jars and bottles are cleaned, too, and sorted into colors clear, green, brown, and more. They are then smashed into tiny pieces that can be used to make bricks and paving materials. Or they are melted down and poured into molds to form new jars and bottles. Plastics cause the biggest garbage problem. All sorts of containers and other products are made from plastic, but only some types can be recycled. Plastic doesn't rot or decompose like many other kinds of trash, which means that when it goes into a landfill, it is there to stay for a very long time. When many plastics are burned, they produce dangerous chemical vapors that pollute the air. The kinds of plastics that can be recycled are cleaned, melted, and poured into molds to make new plastic objects, like pipes, insulation, and office equipment. Because so many trees are cut down every year to make paper for books, magazines, newspapers, and other products, it is important to recycle paper items so new paper can be made from them. During the recycling process, waste paper is chopped into very fine pieces, mixed with water, boiled, and made into a thick soup called pulp. This pulp may be washed and bleached to make it white or left a natural color. Pulp is then spread out onto large screens that allow water to drip through. Next, giant rollers squeeze the pulp, removing more water. Once the new paper is dry, it is wound onto huge spools and later cut into sheets of paper. Other paper products like cardboard boxes are made in similar ways. Wood fibers and other plant materials are also used in paper making.
Can an airplane fly through a cloud?
Most of the time, an airplane can fly easily through a cloud, because the water droplets that form it are too small to affect the aircraft's flight in any way. Flying through a cloud is similar to driving through fog. In fact, fog is really a very low cloud, because his or her vision is obscured. A pilot must rely on navigational equipment to fly through a heavy cloud. Pilots usually try to avoid flying through storm clouds altogether. They often fly above them, because the air currents, rain, hail, or lightning associated with storm clouds can cause bumpy and sometimes dangerous rides.
Do snakes have slimy skin?
Looking at a snake, many people might assume that its skin feels wet and slimy. But snakes, like all reptiles, actually have dry, scaly skin. This tough outer covering helps reptiles keep necessary amounts of moisture in their bodies. Some snakes have a ridge in the middle of their scales, but many are smooth to the touch. Depending on its external conditions, if it's lying in a cold, shady spot or basking on a hot, sunny rock, its skin will either feel cool or warm to the touch.
Why are crocodiles and alligators such good hunters?
One advantage crocodiles and alligators have over their enemies and prey is that they can grow to be fairly large. Alligators can be as big as 19 feet, almost 6 meters, and crocodiles, considered the largest and heaviest living reptiles, can be slightly bigger. They have huge, crushing jaws and massive, powerful tails that help them swim and can be used to thrash their opponents. Perhaps their most useful feature as hunters is the positioning of their eyes and nostrils on the top of their heads. This trait allows alligators and crocodiles to keep most of their bodies submerged in the water, hidden from view, while they wait for an animal to come to the water's edge for a drink. The water-loving reptiles can then snatch their prey, pulling the animal into the water to drown it before eating it.